Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa and happy Monday. And it's the lovely Kerri Saint's new time slot. Yeah. And instead of doing Fridays, we're now doing Mondays, starting our week off on a beautiful note. So thank you so much. And I want to welcome you back, Kerri. And of course, Dr. Christine Cole, who we've had on the show before, and Lisa Gillard, who I've also interviewed before quite a while ago, actually, with Gabby Chung. I remember that. So welcome, ladies. It's really, really awesome to have you all back here and to be talking about more atrocities. Today, we're talking about the family, Australia's infamous cult. So I was just saying off air, when you guys were saying certain, I was like, I don't even want to hear what these people were doing to mothers and babies. I don't care. They can be 90 years old now. I will hunt them down and I will find them and I'll do something, because to me, it's just, gosh, the atrocities committed against mothers and children by people that were heartless and cold and obviously uneducated, I guess, so I've got to try and find my compassion there, and I've got to try and be impeccable with my word. I promise I'm going to try, okay? Welcome, everybody. So, welcome. Oh, Tammy, thank you so much. I so appreciate you. Yes, we had quite a show last night with Caleb. I don't know if you guys watched, but literally just before Caleb came on, we were in the back room chatting about the show. He got news that one of these really good friends from childhood had just taken his own life. So it was but it was a beautiful show, actually. And, these things come at such opportunistic. I mean, for me, when that happens, we're about to go on a show and he gets a message like that. And I mean, I'm always going to offer, are you sure you want to go on? He goes, yes, we have to do this. There's something there. And just the amount of people that have been affected by suicide in this world, whether it's friends, families, parents, siblings, is enormous. And of course, last night's show, instead of doing South America and all the dodgy stuff that's happening there, we ended up talking about suicide and that sort of stuff, which was really very touching. So thank you, Tammy. I know you were there, and thank you everyone who's in the chat. And I hope everyone is wonderful and well. And so I'm going to hand over to you, ladies, Kerri, and you can just sort of fill us in on what's happening and who's who in the zoo when it comes to this infamous cultish family that I would like to do awful things to. All we have to do, I guess, is pray, right? Kill him with kindness. I'll try.
Well, it's a very in-depth story, and I hope we get to the level that I suppose it deserves in being exposed, because it's one of those stories that hasn't had a lot of exposure in the sense of people really knowing what happened in Australia. And to me, like, it's the core element of how perverse we were treating our citizens here in Australia, and what this woman and her members were able to get away with. And I think that's the biggest story, and how they got away with it and why they got away with it, and that it's got greater tentacles than just being a cult. It's far greater than that. So it's, I did that interview with you a while back, and Lisa Gillard saw it, and so did Chris Cole. Remember the one that I did with when we did the little role play, Chantelle, when I got you to kind of go back and think about when you had your own son, and then I played a dirty trick on you and just you ad-libbed and stuff. And I was very mean.
It was very powerful, though. Very powerful.
Very sneaky, Kerri.
I'm sorry. So for those that don't know, Dr. Chris Cole is a very good friend of mine, who is a mum who had her child stolen by former adoptions here in Australia. And I connected with Chris Cole in 2009 when I went public with my story. Or she contacted me, and then we built quite a good relationship, and I was coming in as the adoptee on my lived experience and her as a mum. And she asked me to be involved on her organisation called the Apology Alliance, which was working kind of like an umbrella group. There was lots of organisations under that were lobbying for a Senate inquiry and state and federal apologies. So that's Dr. Chris Cole, and she's written the book behind me there. Baby Stolen, Mother's Told, what is it? Mother's Told to Give Up Your Baby. So she helped edit that with Jan Cashin, and I've viewed a lot of Jan Cashin's artwork here. That's quite horrific because Jan Cashin also had a baby stolen. And then Lisa, in my telling the story of forced adoption and doing that little role play with Chantelle, who was willing to play along, Lisa contacted me to tell me that that was a really pivotal moment for her. And the realization that she too had been a victim of forced adoption under the cult, the family, which existed here in Australia, started in the 1960s. So I've asked Lisa to join us because I think it was really important to highlight how someone is affected by the cult, but also integrating forced adoption. And I really believe that the whole forced adoption itself was a cult movement of eugenics. I mean, Chris is nodding her head. So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't know how we'd like to start. How about I just do a little brief overview of kind of who the lady was that started this cult, and then I can stop and jump in at any time. So either of yours. And so the woman that we're speaking of is a lady called Hamilton-Byrne. Her mother was Florence, was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic after setting a hair alight in the street, and spent 27 years at a psychiatric asylum until she died. Now, the mother claimed to be a medium and a psychic and could claim that she could speak to the dead. She was pretty connected to the occult, and then kind of like passed this sort of stuff on to her daughter, Anne. Her father was an itinerant worker, which meant that Anne spent a lot of time in orphanages as a child, and she was the eldest of 7 children. So basically, Anne, had spending a large amount of time in an orphanage. There's a fair bit about her early years, but I want to go into in the early 1960s, where she basically starts getting herself involved in, she was very involved in spiritualism and started learning yoga and basically started teaching it, mostly to middle-class women of Melbourne. Now, I don't want to target yoga as a bad thing here. It's what she was doing within this whole yoga movement. It wasn't just about yoga. She was incorporating some pretty dark arts within it. She was clever, intuitive, and charismatic. She knew how to find chinks in people's armors. She basically targeted a lot of wives who were unhappy in their marriages and encouraged them to leave and kind of join her in a little group. She also attracted gay male followers and offering them refuge from Australia's laws against homosexuality. If anybody wants to look into Australia, we had a big period of gays being murdered, and it was quite prolific and pretty horrid. Her masterstroke was recruiting an eminent physicist from Leeds, a Dr. Raynor Johnson, who was master of Queen's College at Melbourne University. So at the time, spiritualism had gained a lot of popularity in scientific circles, and Johnson, nearing his retirement, was eager to explore unconventional territory. He became besotted and beguiled by Hamilton, who claimed to have extrasensory perception. He even went on as far as declare that she was the new Messiah. He experimented with LSD and recorded in his diary that her face became divinely beautiful with sublime authority, adding that she was unquestionably the wisest, serenest, and most gracious, generous soul he had ever met. Johnson and his wife bought a house in Ferny Creek, where Hamilton lived, called the Hamlet, hence the family was born. Now, I just want to kind of throw in there, why doesn't the intellectual and respectable Johnson, how does that kind of work in? But she knew how to work people, so he was a physicist and very well known, and he taught in the universities. It brought her and her group a sense of respectability that society started to accept, and enabled him and his high priestess to recruit many more wealthy New Age seeking professionals, including doctors, psychiatrists, lawyers, nurses, and social workers. Hamilton then began giving sermons from a purple throne in a special built lodge funded by donations, and the family's beliefs were based on Christianity and Eastern mysticism. The family members claimed Anne was the reincarnation of Jesus and was a living God. Followers were handpicked from Melbourne's wealthy professional elite with promises of spiritual fulfillment. She is well known to say, "I've been waiting for you," in the first meeting with a potential recruit, and each member of the family were given a photo of her and one of her children to place on altars in their rooms. The family motto, unseen, unknown, unheard. Followers were forced to take dangerous amounts of LSD and other hallucinogenic drugs as part of their prolonged initiation rites. She dictated every aspect of their lives, including what to think, where, who to marry and who not to marry. And one rule applied: to do absolutely everything she said in total obedience. And then we'll talk about New Haven Hospital. What I wanted to put down was, I found a really interesting fact when researching how this doctor sort of came in to be beguiled by Hamilton. Around that time, Hamilton's 19-year-old daughter was in a car accident and she got pretty injured. And whilst in hospital, they didn't think that she would survive it. And Anne did her little spiritual thing, whatever it was. And after she did it, her daughter made a miraculous recovery. So it basically got a lot of people sort of sitting up and taking notice. And that's when Johnson goes, she's the most divine person alive, right? So she was also known to cast spells on people. Early on in her yoga class, there was a young fellow that disagreed with her, and she said straight out, he's not going to be here tomorrow, as something's going to happen to him, and he ended up extremely unwell. So there were things like that. So she was basically into very dark occult practices that had some sort of effect on people. So that's why I don't want to just, I think some of the research on it really kind of minimizes the enormity of what she did. And I think there are a few that you can go and look into to actually start to break it open, to go, this was much, much darker, much, much bigger than stated by the newspapers or anyone else. So I'll kind of leave it there and let someone else talk, because then we'll go into a few other things later. So
I would just like to comment on that, because it's just so interesting for me to see how people would use, and I can see how she would have used the loopholes. You know, make no mistake, as someone who loves my yoga, and I'm a great yogini, I'm very well aware that yoga has been infiltrated as well. You know, there's the Eastern teachings have been seriously infiltrated as well. And so they would take that sort of thing, combine it with a whole lot of other stuff, and obviously make it what they want it to be. And as you said, she could see the chinks in people's armor, right? Yeah. So she obviously would have been gifted. Just because you're gifted doesn't mean that you're good, right?
Yes.
We know that the dark forces are highly skilled at anything to do with the occult or the unseen, because that's really what the occult is. It's the unseen, right? So
she was using her skills for evil, not for good, you know, and I've kind of, we've talked about this in the sense of she obviously was in an orphanage. We know the orphanages were pretty horrid, and what may or may not have happened to her there. But, I've talked about it, that there were certain things that through my childhood that spiritually I think that I could have gone one way or the other. One way, but that's it. And I think that does pop its head up for many people who have suffered some sort of abuse or whatever.
Did you say that her mother was in a was she schizophrenic?
Paranoid schizophrenic.
Paranoid schizophrenic.
Yeah, but her mother also
a lot as well. That would explain a lot.
Correct. That I looked into it. It was like her mother was connected to the occult. So I can't remember who I listened to in an interview about schizophrenia. It was a guy who worked in hospitals and stuff.
Jerry Marsden, I've interviewed him.
Yeah, and so how many of them claim to be Jesus or God or whatever? And of course, this is what Anne Hamilton-Byrne believed herself to be, the new Messiah. So the interesting fact is that she basically she married when she was 20, and they had one child, but she kept having miscarriages. And basically her first husband, he dies. And I told this to Chris earlier, which blew her brain because it just made sense to us, was that her husband was going to pick up the adopted child when he died in the car accident. And
they were going to adopt a child.
Yes, a boy child. He was going to pick him up when he died in the car accident, her first husband. So I'm wondering how much that played a role in where she ends up going to get these children into the family under adoption. So he dies, but it was interesting where he was going to get that child. And Chris and I know this organisation extremely well, and it's called Barnardo's. So do you want to tell everybody who Barnardo is briefly, Chris?
Barnardo's, Dr. Barnardo's, people hold him up as some kind of a hero. But in actual fact, when I did my research, I found that he had been taken to court on a number of occasions by parents whose children he had scooped up off the street and had tried to send them on ships over to Canada or Australia or somewhere. And he was making a lot of money from doing that. And he would also dress up children that he picked up, put ash on them and put torn clothes on them and take pictures of them and advertise that these were waifs that he had picked up and was trying to save. But in actual fact, he was stealing the children of the poor and then migrating them out to the colonies, like to Canada, where they would never be seen or heard of again. So he and Barnardo's itself has a lot to do currently in Australia with the out-of-home care industry. And they were the ones, that was the group who put an actual price on how much the government would save if they fast-tracked small children, infants under the age of 2, babies and under the age of 2, if they fast-tracked them from the foster care system into adoption, that the state, this is going back to 2013 when I was researching it, would save the state $37,000 per child. So, when you privatise out-of-home care industry and then you subcontract it to other people to supposedly vet who's going to be the foster carers, it's just an open door for a lot of abuse. And there are a lot of children that have raised cases of being sexually and physically abused whilst in the foster care system. So to me, it's very dangerous to just pass off children willy-nilly to strangers, not properly vet them. And with adoption, it was even worse. And this is one of the things I noticed while reading some of the stuff that you were reading around the family. They just said she stole these children via her her cult members who had infiltrated into the hospitals as working as social workers or doctors or nurses, and they would be doing these terrible things to unmarried mothers, like drugging them, forcing them to sign consents, putting sheets and things over their faces. Well, that's what was going on right across Australia. So you wouldn't even have to have been in, the cult member would have just seamlessly gone into the hospital system, because that's what was going on across Australia. The other thing that intrigued me was what she never ever got charged for any of that. She got a $5,000 fine only for creating fraudulent birth certificates. Well, if you look into birth certificates, they're all fraudulent, because they all maintain that somebody else were the people who gave birth, and they hide the real identity of the biological parents, so that the adoptee cannot find or access their families. And that was done purposely from the lobbying of people that wanted to adopt and did not want to have any interaction with the biological family. They just wanted to cut the child off from all their extended kin, not just the mother, but the father and aunts and uncles and cousins, and off everybody. And then they would have, adoptive parents were guaranteed that for the rest of their lives, that child would be as if born to them.
Yeah.
So in these articles that I'm reading, it says, oh, she stole these children via the very lax adoption regulations in Australia in the 60s and 70s. Well, that's what happened to all of us.
Wow.
And that's what I'm saying about the, and nobody's been individually held accountable. Not one social worker, not one doctor, not one nurse, not anybody who were breaking the law and basically running child trafficking operations out of hospitals, drugging mothers, violating our rights, and no individual yet today has held accountable. And why? We'll have a look at who the cult members were. They were the elite. They were the professionals. 25% of those cult members were in the medical area, were doctors, psychiatrists, nurses, social workers working in the medical area. So it was very easy for them to infiltrate. But some of the, as I said, the practices which they say, oh, it was done with these irregular adoption practices. When I'm reading them, I'm thinking, well, yes, they were all done like that. They were all, mothers were treated like that. They were all drugged and trafficked out of the hospitals. I mean, I know of cases where they were saying, oh, she hid the identity from, and she told them all that she was the mother. Well, many adoptive parents said that they were the real parents. I mean, there's members in the Apology Alliance who are what are called late discovery adoptees. So they're in their 40s and 50s and only just finding out that the parents that they thought were their biological parents are not. So, the ramifications and the thing, and as I said, this is why I think no one's been held accountable, because the detective who was involved in the case said he couldn't understand why all she got was a $5,000 fine for making fraudulent adoptions. That was because she adopted so many children, and people were giving her children, cult members were giving her children as well as she's going through the adoption system. But as I said, it's because so many powerful people that were doctors, nurses, social workers, lawyers, judges, they were all adopting children too. Yeah. So they would all get exposed as being part of these irregular adoption practices where the mother's rights were totally violated, and and as far as human rights, any treaty that Australia had signed to do with human rights were totally violated.
Yeah. There's to
know that. Sorry, why were so many doctors, lawyers, judges, whatever, interested in adopting children, though? What was the attraction?
Apparently there was, according to a friend of mine, Dr. Jeff Rickaby, he said there was a high level of chlamydia after the Second World War with soldiers coming back. And so there was a lot of infertility. So there were a lot of very powerful people who wanted to adopt so they would fit in, because Australian society was very much geared to be around the family. You were seen as being, if you were infertile, it was very much stigmatized. So there were a lot of people in high places who could afford to go and basically walk into a hospital and just say, well, I'll have that baby, thank you very much. And there were also wealthy women who would pretend that they'd wear a pillow and they'd go into the hospital, and a single mother would give birth, and they would give that baby immediately to the
Adoptive.
sorry.
That's all right.
To the adoptive parent, and they would call that rapid adoptions. And then they would be trying to get the often if a woman had a miscarriage, they would then immediately swap and give the healthy baby of a single mother. And I'm just going to take my granddaughter out. She's just going. Anyway, you carry on, Kerri.
All right. So, Anne Hamilton-Byrne actually faked her pregnancies, number of them. So she would wear this procedure thing to make her look pregnant, so to kind of keep it going that she'd had these children. But so the first child arrived in the cult in the early 1970s. It was like 1968, 1970s. And there were like 28 children in all. Some were the biological children of the members, and others were obtained through illegal adoptions arranged by the doctors, the lawyers, the social workers, and the members. And the children's identities were changed using false birth certificates or deed polls. All were given the surname Hamilton-Byrne and made to dress alike, having their hair dyed blonde. Now, what I might do here is that I sent some photos through. So there's a group photo there of the children in a row, and there's also a photo there.
Just want to find it here. Okay, there's these.
Yep. So that's basically some of the children. That's how they were dressed. They were mostly all dressed alike, and there's other photo there of them, a few boys with all their hair dyed white. So she believed that they were this great Aryan race that basically would, at the end of time, that they'd basically repopulate the world. So is there another photo there? Should be a photo there of her, but that's it. So this is how she would dress the children and dye their hair. And there's a photo there of Anne Hamilton-Byrne, a lady with a young child. So that photo was given to all the members, and they had to put that in an altar in their room. I don't know if she kept the same child. I mean, Lisa might be able to explain more. But this is what was given to every member to put on an altar in their room. So there's, you might like to run the little video if it's possible. It goes for like a minute, and it just sort of gives people a really good sort of a view of how the story was covered here in Australia. Okay.
I'm looking right at each one of you. You are the initiate. You are the cosmic being.
Under the influence of LSD, Anne had this vision that she's got to collect all these children from birth, because one day there's going to be World War III, where most of the population of the world's going to perish. She was preparing us for, when the time happens, to re-educate the world.
We've received the call. Great things will be done.
I'm wondering if you've got any comment to make now about what happened to the children.
Investigations are underway into a religious sect in Victoria known as the Family. At the weekend, 6 children were seized from a property owned by the sect at Lake Eildon.
Children stolen at birth, brainwashed, beaten, even given mind-altering drugs like LSD.
The sect was made up of professional people who worshipped Anne Hamilton-Byrne as Jesus Christ reincarnated in the female form.
This woman had phenomenal presence. She's strong, she's powerful.
Entrancing, beautiful.
The eyes that look through your soul.
Wow, wow, wow. I mean, how beautiful are those kids though, right?
Yeah.
And as you can say, you can see their little hairs all blonde and they're all looking picture pretty.
Yeah.
Wow. How
And
insane.
do you know Julian Assange had a connection, linkage with the family? His after his parents divorced, his mother's boyfriend was involved with the cult, and he was interviewed. I saw him in an American interview with Stephen Colbert, called Colbert or something, and they said he said to them that he had this friend of her mother's who was in the cult, and they were continually moving and running to get away from this guy. He was like a dark presence that they couldn't get rid of eventually when the mother realised that, you know, there was something very off. But Julian really didn't go into too much detail about it, but it's just interesting. He's always had that very white hair.
Yeah.
So I wonder. And the fact that what was their motto again? Unseen, unheard.
Unseen, unheard. Yeah.
And unknown.
You want to say something?
And it's like he has gone the opposite. He's wanted to expose and publish and get everything out into the light. So it sort of makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. So,
Wow.
Lisa, would you like to share? Well, so we don't monopolise and take over on you. I'd really like you to share on what we've already shared with, or anything that you're comfortable to share.
Yeah, probably I'll start with this. I don't believe I shared this when I was with you, Chantelle, last.
Lisa, I just want to ask you, sorry, is there any way you can turn up your volume, just a volume?
Oh, sorry.
Just a tiny bit.
Is that better?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is a
you
bit
can't
better.
move forward a little bit. Yeah.
Let's move forward.
Yeah.
So it would have been maybe 3 and a bit years ago. I was in the middle of a police case again, dealing with my own family stuff, and my daughter and I just casually sat down to watch, because I have gaps. For those who don't know, my background is satanic ritual abuse, and I had like most of us, lots of gaps. So we're sitting there and we're watching the documentary. It's on Netflix, I believe, for anyone that would want to watch it. And I was sitting there watching it, and I just was like, what? We paused it, and what had happened, I had always had this weird feeling, because on my original birth certificate, my name was Lisa Byrne. Freaky. I don't know if it's got anything to do with her, but my mum's married name at that time was Byrne, and I was born in 1974. So it should have been Airey, Airey. Anyway, so we go back to watching the documentary, paused it, and it was when Anne and her then husband, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit, we're getting married, and it's just like it was really quite a quick shot. Sorry, I'm bouncing. It's because I've got my thing on two boxes. And
Good.
was it? And it was my great grandmother was at the actual wedding, and I just looked at the daughter and was like, "The hell?" Like, okay, am I seeing things? We watched it, and then I called a friend of the family, which was my aunt, but I didn't give her any details because I just wanted to. I sent her a picture. I took a screenshot, and I didn't tell her anything. And I just said, can you just confirm that this is your grandmother? And she said, yeah, of course. She's obviously passed. And that was it. And it was kind of started from there. The next part of my journey, I call it. Fast forward to a new memory that I had. I won't go into too much detail because it's pretty graphic and I don't want to do graphics. But my main abuser, I thought he had someone that was above him. Like, that's the only way I can explain it. And in this memory, I get names, places, like, I don't know how, it just comes to me and I'll just write it down. And we were at her house and it was a full moon that was really bright. She came out of the house, and this was quite a while after, literally after I'd watched the documentary. So it was probably a year and a bit after. And it was the first time that I'd actually seen him actually scared of somebody. And you could feel just this evil presence of her. And I've been around a lot of evil people, but he was scared of her. So I was like, if he's scared of her, like, she's obviously the boss. Go back to, I was 11 or 12. I was pregnant 4 times by a cult, not the family cult that I know of anyway, but the one that I was growing up in. And I'd been taken to hospital. It's at the bottom of the Dandenong Ranges, Mountain District Hospital. It was a private hospital. Now, all this came from me just having a memory. I was in the back of an ambulance. I was with my mother and her husband. And it was quite a trip. I think it would have been like nearly 30 minutes drive from where we lived. So I wouldn't know that. So I wrote down all the street names and everything as an adult. And, I looked it up on Google Maps, as you do. And I rang somebody that I knew in my family, and they said, how would you know where this is? Because it was quite a fair way away. And I said, can you just go and do the drive and tell me if that's real and it's a real hospital? Like, am I making this stuff up? And they said no. And they were quite angry about it. So I kind of got the gist of, like, maybe I not talk about that. So I was in a hospital bed. I was 20. I don't know why I know this, but I was 20. I have researched this before, and a lot of, I don't know why, I don't want to know why, but a lot of survivors who become breeders, essentially, they induce the pregnancy sometimes around 27 weeks or earlier. For me, it was twice, it was 27 weeks. My first daughter, she was murdered, basically. And the one that I had in hospital was a little boy. What was completely different. My mum and her partner was sitting there while I gave birth. All I remember, because there's obviously snippets I don't recall, but it was just a really bright room. And it was like what I've got 5 children, so I know what that's like. They placed, he was super tiny, but he's fully wrapped up. I didn't know whether it was a boy or a girl, obviously, but the doctor, I remembered him. Sorry. I remembered him and his face. I was when it comes to those type of memories, they're very clear and they're very, like, colours and everything just stand out. His shoes, just everything. And so he was looking at me, and he had my baby, and he gave him to me, and he let me hold him. And I was 12 years old, and I just unwrapped just because I wanted to see. And I was like, oh, it's obvious there's a little boy. And I can't say to you, I believe he's still alive, but I mean, back then, I don't know. I don't know what they would have done, or but he is as quick as he was given to me, he was taken away.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just, yeah, I wanted to scream, but I was too scared. So that was that. And then we go into Kerri, listening to, like, I've had that memory for a very, very, very long time. And I've been watching Kerri, like, on her, is it every second week, Kerri? Yeah. And she did that thing with Chantelle, and I was like, hang on a minute. It just clicked. I was like, they took my baby away, and it's the same thing. I didn't click for me. Like, I just, because I had this, so much compassion and new understanding of the whole, what adoption is shown to be. And that happened to me. And when it hit me, I was like, oh, yeah, I was just like in tears. And then I contacted Kerri and just thanked her for sharing what she did, because it did actually help put another piece to my crazy puzzle, which I'm still trying to work out, where why my great grandmother was at the wedding, and why he's not even my dad, he's my stepdad. I don't know how it all fits still, but I will say this: I did contact the detective years and years and years ago, and he was lovely. I said, I don't, because I'd watched it quite a few times. And I was like, I'm really annoyed. I think there's more to this story. Like, this is not just. I know if you watch it, Chantelle, I'm like, this is SRA. This is not just. I'm sorry, I don't mean to demean anyone being, drugged and they starved. But I spent a lot of time down at Lake Eildon as a child as well. So it's just, I'll leave it at that. Kerri, go.
I just want to help the situation a little bit here for you, Lisa, because I too have had blocks of my large majority of my life, my childhood just gone. And I really want to let people understand that there are some stages in your life, some things where you're watching TV or an ad or someone says something and all of a sudden you get a bit of a picture, and it may not make sense, or it may make sense, and that it's not just your brain playing tricks on you, because your whole physical being reacts to it, and you might find yourself heart palpitating, sweats, you might be dizzy, you might want to throw up. Whole lot of things can happen, and you're just in absolute disbelief, or it's like it's happening to you the first time. So you'll get a bit of a picture, and then maybe later on you'll get another one, and it's almost like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle, and it's so frustrating because you've got so many gaps in your life, and there are times when you'll react to things but have no memory. So you'll physically react, have no visual memory of what it is. So I really identify when you're trying to tell the story, and the way that you're telling it tells me that you're a person who's had a brain that's been really fractured by the abuse that you've endured. And so I think by listening to me kind of share with Chantelle and the viewers about trying to get people to understand the enormity of what the mothers went through, and doing that little role play, that was just another added, that was a real aha moment for you, for all those broken little pictures that you had. And it really struck you quite strongly, and you told me that you had a very physical reaction to it afterwards. It was also releasing the pain with that memory. And you contacted me to tell me that you had experienced that, but also you were, I'm trying to pick the right word, when you've had everything fractured and you finally have a bit of a breakthrough, it's you kind of feel a release from that in sense of, I'm not going mad after all. This was real. This is what happened. But you're also dealing with the enormous pain of it. And so I'm pleased that I did it. I took a little bit of a gamble when I did it with Chantelle. But you know, Chris, I haven't had a child stolen, so I don't know what it feels like. I've only gathered the information by my experience with speaking to the mums of what they endured. And you know, when I did it, there were a number of mums that actually got in contact with me afterwards to say how powerful that was for them, and they felt that it would really help other people to understand what they had endured. You know, like you were like 11 or 12 at the time. It is like, I mean, I was absolutely horrified when I heard that. I mean, it's bad enough that adult women have their children taken, but you're a child and had that experience.
And then just to add on, sorry, Kerri, what were you going to say?
No, Chantelle wants to say something.
Oh, sorry, go Chantelle.
That's all right. She muted herself.
Sorry, I just muted myself because I just, you know, but wasn't that kind of normal though for these freaks to get children as young as that? Because from what I'm understanding, in the breeder programs in the system, they obviously put in girls on hormones very early, so they can obviously start breeding kids from as young as 10 years old.
I was 10 when I did my first period, but there is also, I'm a researcher, if you're sexually abused at a young age, your body just naturally can start to, you know, those hormones start to happen earlier than they should. So obviously they also do the other as well. They do everything, don't they?
Gosh, this is just, it's torture.
Do you remember the name of the hospital, Lisa, that you had your baby in? What was it?
Mountain District Hospital, but like, I'm so sorry. I should have done I think I was just a little bit taken aback by my emotions today.
That's all right.
I usually would write everything down, and I was like, I'm still like processing the fact that that's what it was, Kerri. So, and I also was talking to my husband. I always do it. Like I said, I think I don't think you ever process ever like fully until you're wherever we go. But my son, I've kind of like compartmentalized that because I don't feel like he's gone. And that was the thing that I wanted to say. I feel like, because I know as a mum, there's that when you have your baby, you know, if you've had one, we all know what it's like. Like, but I feel like that was like an attachment still. I can't explain it. I was going to say something. It's gone.
I would say that the hospital was probably riddled with people that were in on it, and very much like the hospital that is it New Haven Hospital or the other hospitals that obviously Hamilton-Byrne used, because one of the police officers, I know when that guy that was interviewed, he said he said, hang on a minute, he said something like you had a baby in a cult hospital with you had a baby born in cult hospitals, delivered by cult midwives, handed over by cult social workers, who then was handled by cult lawyers.
Yes.
So everybody kind of had their job to do. Yeah, and I know that when Chris edited the book, and I know Janice has written stuff, and then through the Senate inquiry, a lot of the mums talked about a well-oiled wheel, in the sense of that the minute that the mum was pregnant, there was a secret code placed on her file, and everywhere she went, it was like everybody knew how to keep her funneled through the system to hold her hostage to it, where so it didn't matter who she turned to, the dialogue was pretty much the same and the treatment was the same. So there was no, you couldn't go to the police. The police, like I found out through this, like what the police actually say when people brought it up about why didn't the police act, because there were obviously people reporting that children were being taken right from their mothers. The police's attitude and response at the time was, it's not a police matter, it's a welfare matter.
Correct. But the police are also involved as well, as we know.
Yeah.
I was going to say when I was sorry.
No.
Please go ahead, Lisa. Please go ahead.
When I was taken in the ambulance, it obviously, there's bits of memories fractured, but that was very vivid. There was no sirens or nothing like that. It's very cold, ambulance. And there was a lady, two women and one lady, and she was talking to they knew each other. And so I thought I was nuts when I first started having the memories of it, because it came at different times. It wasn't a full, story. I was like, am I nuts? Why would people do this? We don't think like them, and like you said, it was a well-oiled machine.
Well-oiled system.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to try. I've asked Morné to actually try and see if he can find. There's a video clip actually of stuff that happens. I think it was maybe 2 years ago now. There was investigations in hospitals here in South Africa where they're doing exactly the same thing.
Yep.
And they are finding babies, like mothers with twins, for example. They'll say one of your twins is dead. And then they will take that twin and it gets trafficked either for organ trafficking, whatever, harvesting, yes. Or the kids get trafficked and stuff like this. So we're just going to see if we can actually find that clip as well, because this is obviously going on, and it has been going on for a very long time, right? And I just find it absolutely shocking. And also the doctors involved, the nurses involved, and of course it has to be home affairs. I don't know if you guys call it home affairs.
You mean welfare? Yeah.
Well,
no, home affairs is where you get your identity documents. I mean, if I want my passport or my ID document, go to home affairs. Yeah. So government is involved in,
I can't
traffic.
I can't get anything. I've tried. I emailed the hospital. I went to the hospital. My husband and I drove there in 2013, I believe. And then I've got someone who's working on my case still. I can't. There's some stuff I can't share. But she said, "Oh, you should be able to find information." Some people are very naive. She's lovely, but I said, "You won't find anything." Because I was there not just for that, I was there for other things as well. Abuse. They would leave me there for weeks sometimes. It was a private hospital, so it's a different name now. I'll have to Google it and send it to you, Kerri. But even just the place where it is situated, and Kew was another place. Is it Kew in Melbourne?
Q's where they had the psychiatric hospital, their psychiatric hospital, and the Dandenongs area where was a lot of the cult members living.
Well, that's where her nice big white house was that I was taken to. And
do you remember that? Do you have memory of the White House? I mean, is that something you actually remember?
I wrote. That's how it came, Chantelle. So I had the one I told you about being taken there to the house, the back of the house. But I'm sure, in the documentary, it's just this brick brown house. And anyway, I thought I'll just Google it, and I did. You can do Google Earth now, and it was, I've got all the information, and I looked it up, and then because it had at the back of the house, which is very unusual because the Dandenong Mountains is just, to most people who don't know what goes on there, it's a beautiful place, but there's a lot of occult activity. It's just full of trees, obviously. But
usually on the surface, it's gorgeous. All this deception, so deceptive.
You would be able to feel it. Like I can't go even near even the bottom of it. I just, my whole body starts tingling and But in the back of her house, she had this flat. It was very vivid that what I remembered. It was just big flat area of grass, and it was short manicured grass, and I was like, that's really strange. The reason why she had that was because some children didn't live, so I'll just say it that way. And so when I went and did the Google search, I found it, and it looked exactly what I remembered. It's like, I'm not crazy.
Yeah, no. And that's quite typical. We've had mums that were adults when their child was taken, like at least, 20, 21 to 24.
Yeah. And
we've got mums that the only time they remembered they had a baby was when that child actually found them, or they had an experience similar to themselves, like they were hearing on the news about the Senate inquiry and bang, they're kind of having flashbacks, remembering they had a child taken. We're hearing stories at the moment of quite elderly, frail women in the nursing homes calling out for their baby, and everybody's going, well, hang on, mum only had 2 or 3 were here, like what does she mean the other one? So it affects far more people than society realizes, and it's been kept like even with the Senate inquiry, Chris and she'll confirm this, with the Senate inquiry and the federal apology, there are still people that don't know, enormous amount of people that know nothing about forced adoption and what Australia did to its own people. We understand the stolen generation quite clearly, but we've got 250,000 plus victims here in Australia. That's
only the mothers. Then you've got the children, then you've got the fathers, and then you've got the subsequent siblings who've lost a brother or a sister. So it probably touches a couple of million people in Australia, and it's transgenerational. So the abuse you're holding epigenetically is going to be transferred on. Like my subsequent child after I had my daughter taken, he suffers from PTSD. And so I've carried that trauma in my body, and him being the next baby, he wake up with nightmares as a small child and have like panic attacks and think somebody was going to take him.
That is so interesting because, there is really, as a healer, there are certain treatments I do that I regress my clients back to the womb. A child is very aware. A fetus might be a fetus, but remember, the soul ain't no fetus. The soul is very smart and knows exactly. And there's something called woundology and womb healing. And what happens is every time, and it comes down from generations of women, right? So the trauma you and your child, the child that was stolen, experienced in your womb remains there in your cells. And with the next baby, that baby taps right into it. That's why I was like so mad that I came after my sisters. I said, it's their fault I've got all my issues. But seriously, I mean, that is something super, super interesting, Christine, what you're just saying there about your son after the one that was actually taken from you. He would have suffered that PTSD as well. And I want to say, as a healer, this stuff is real. We cannot for one moment think that it's not real. We have to look into the stuff. So it's like your son that experienced that PTSD should actually go and just have that released from him, because that's actually not his trauma. And it sits in the cells, it like melts in like plastic. Like plastic, and it's actually so sad because, when that happens, because it definitely is real. But by the way, Morné was able to find that video. So when there's a gap, you got ladies, I was going to say guys, there's no guys yet. Ladies, obviously.
I just noticed Leslie Mitchell has, you might be able to answer this, Chris. There was a drug called, can you see it? Scopo, it's SCOPOLAMINE, used on young unmarried mothers. She says it's used to, what was it, to kind of wipe your memory or something, called uses. It was so the mothers would forget. Was it? Do you know if it was used in Australia, Chris?
Yes, that was used. That I remember. Different hospitals use different drug regimes, but for the same, like Crown Street, for instance, they used sodium amytal, sodium pentabarbital, and chloral hydrate. So they used those three. The guy who was the consulting psychiatrist was Dr. John Bailey, Dr. Harry Bailey. And he was also running. This is why I'm interested in the clinic, the psychiatric centre, because they were doing the same kind of deep sleep therapy. And this Dr. Bailey, for instance, he would keep the patients asleep for days and days and days, and he would be giving them all the same kind of drugs that we were getting, but they were being basically given intravenously. So, and he'd actually got a Rockefeller scholarship in 1959 and had gone to Canada and visited the McGill University, where Dr. Ewan Cameron was the head psychiatrist. He was working for the CIA, and the ex-patients from there successfully sued the American government for the CIA operating a mind control experimental practice there in that McGill University, a hospital attached to that, run by Ewan Cameron. Now, this Harry Bailey goes on the Rockefeller scholarship, about the Rockefellers and all their investments into eugenics. He then goes from there to London and meets with Dr. William Sargent, who is running the same kind of therapies in London and is connected with the Tavistock Institute. Most people will be aware of the Tavistock Institute. And so this is why I was very interested in the fact that this woman was using the drug of choice of the CIA, which is the LSD, as well as the many other drugs. There's a list of them in one of those articles that you were, a number of them. But the LSD and the shock therapy and the deep sleep therapy were all being run with the clinic that was connected to the family, and that was being run by cult members. So the people that were running that hospital were all connected to the cult, the doctors, the nurses, the psychiatrist, and so you see what I mean, like how conspiratorial it is. It's happening in Canada, in America, in Australia, and just like with the bio labs at the moment that they've got spread all over the world, they were having these, what I believe were mind control operations going on. And I think we were part of it. That's my opinion. I think we were part of it because of the connections of the people, because of the drugs that were used, and because of how streamlined the whole process was. Like once you were in that hospital, when you're only 12 years old, and your baby scooped away, that was a practice that was happening all across Australia.
And I love I love how, the tentacles of this are so deep and so vast, so evil, and yet our newspapers will say, oh, it was the social mores of the day that was the reason. This is the cover story that they use to do the crimes that they did and the
Cover up the crimes. Yep.
Yeah. Did
And
you want
it's
to show
still
them?
going on. It's still
going on. Absolutely still going on. And because people still are demanding babies. And as long as there's a demand for babies, this kind of stuff's going on. Of course, it's got worse. Now there's demand for organs and all other satanic abuse stuff and everything else. And I think going back to the early part of last century, when they started formalising the removing of children and babies, I think we were the canaries in the coal mine. I think they were experimenting with how they could, how much they could get away with splitting up a mother and a child, because that's the strongest instinct you've got. And would the mother remember? Would she forget? Would it, and how would the child respond? Because with transhumanism, they're moving forward now and they're wanting to grow babies in pods. I mean, can you imagine anything worse? Because the connection...
They've already been doing it, Christine. They've been doing it since the turn of the century. When we're looking at these babies, the Cabbage Patch Kids. In fact, Caleb was doing a show. We did a show on that. At the turn of the century, all these orphan trains, all these kids, and they literally take DNA of whoever. Often it is from a lot of the SRA stuff. Okay, they will take the sperm, menstrual blood, and some other type of liquid, like would be tears sometimes, or even dead people, right? And they take that with the DNA. The alchemists know how to do this. The alchemists are creating, and they use electricity, and they are growing kids in pods. And these things are then matched to these Nephilim type spirits that are hovering around, because that's exactly what and they've been doing that since the turn of the century. That's where all these incubator babies and stuff were coming from. That's what they are. So
I can only imagine that you're like robots, because if you're in a pod and you're not getting the thoughts and the feelings of your mother, you're not getting that interaction with your mother that's going on the whole time. Well,
I think that's why so many psychopaths are in this world, because I do believe that's what it's about. I do believe. And when we're looking at stuff like the black-eyed kids, I mean, there's a whole thing around the black-eyed kids. That's what they are. These are kids that are obviously created, and they are then matched with dismembered spirits that are hovering looking for bodies. That's pretty much what it is. They've been doing it since forever. That's what all these incubator babies and things are. And I do believe that's what a lot of the psychopaths, or there's a guy that we interviewed, Mr. Fox, as well. He talks about the organic portals. They literally operate for the lower three chakras. They don't have the capacity to operate with the higher frequencies. Love, compassion, kindness, tenderness, all of these things. And these guys are being used. I mean, there's one thing, I mean, we understand the dark forces can never create, right? Only God can create, but they emulate. And they will take everything that God has created and they've inverted it. They've inverted it into something so depraved. And it's really pretty much that they've kept us in the dark. They've kept us in the dark as to what they're doing. It's just disgusting. It is so depraved, honestly. I mean, they've been doing this for a long time.
I just wanted to share something. It's not really, but sorry, my phone. Okay, what happened? I'm coming back.
That's right. We can still hear you. You're right.
You're good, Lisa.
I might cut out, so I'm going to get this in before I go. I don't know what's going on with my charger. It's never done this, but anyway, talking about like generational kind of abuse and stuff. What you were saying before, Chantelle. When I was born, I was taken away from my mother straight away. It was a seemingly normal thing because I had a a congenital thing that yeah. So I never actually bonded with her. I was put in one of those I've got a picture of me in one of those humidity crib things, and I was in hospital the first 3 months of my life. So my mum never got to really bond. So that like I can go back literally generation. My great grandmother, the one I said that was in somehow connected to the family, her father abused her, and then so it goes down the line. So, and I'm the first one that's gone, no, stops with me. So yeah, interesting. Sorry, I just wanted to share that before I.
No, it makes a lot of sense.
Lisa, if you leave accidentally, you can come back in, fix your problem, and come back in if you happen to disappear. Yeah. So don't just go out and not try and get back in. You might be able to fix your problem. Did you want to play that video, Chantelle, and Lisa can figure out what a...
Yeah, I wanted to show you guys this video, actually. Okay. I'm just going to play it quick.
I'll try.
Independent practitioner found unequivocally, and she'll give you more details, that the mother was indeed recently pregnant, had a recent cesarean section, and she'll provide other details when she speaks. Subsequent to that, we launched further investigations into the conduct of these doctors, the nurses, hospital administrators, including accessing through sources, in some cases, the bank accounts. What we discovered was really devastating. Really devastating. What we discovered, which will be presented in our video series in great detail, is that our state hospitals are the epicenter of human trafficking and baby trafficking. We can say unequivocally, this happens at Steve Biko Academic Hospital, Tembisa Academic Hospital, Tembisa Hospital, and George Macquarie Hospital. We can tell you unequivocally that involved in this is home affairs, multiple IDs, records of patients that don't exist or disappear, babies that come in, if mothers deliver twins, they are told the one twin died and the other one is trafficked. Or if they're very young, vulnerable black women, they are told that their babies have died during delivery and the babies are trafficked. We were able to, at great risk to our journalists, deep dive into the syndicates and uncover horrific stories of how these babies are trafficked from Gauteng through to Mpumalanga, through to West Africa, and also to Europe and the United States. About 50% of the babies are given for adoption. The other 50% are used for muti, cosmetic surgery, and stem cells. In some cases, the placentas are used for cosmetic and other stem cells. This has been a very, very dangerous investigation. It has put at risk our journalists and our investigators. In fact, many of them have been stopped by none other than police and threatened to back off. Many of them who visited the doctors, within 10 minutes of them being there, 10 minutes later, police cars arrived. What we are saying to our government, it's okay to make mistakes. It's not okay to cover up.
The Gauteng government notes the report released today by the independent media group. We want to put it on record that the Gauteng government has taken the legal action. The provincial government cannot stand by while serious allegations are made against nurses, doctors, hospital management and healthcare workers. These are women and men of integrity who have worked tirelessly during this particular period and before to make sure that they save lives.
Wow.
Well, that's what was happening. Oops, I'm on mute.
How old was that video, Chantelle? How long ago was that came out?
That was, I was thinking maybe 2 years now. And I actually want to actually do a follow-up on that and see if anything has come of that.
Yeah.
You know, I don't hold my breath because
it just shows you how helpless we were, you know, at 15 and 16 and 17, the majority age of the mothers. When we went into the hospitals and we wanted to see our babies and they wouldn't bring the babies to us. When we cried, when they took us to an annex miles away from the hospital where we had no access to our clothes or couldn't get any access to the nursery, and all our stuff would be locked up. The place where we were would be locked up so we couldn't get out. It was like being imprisoned. And with our babies, it didn't matter whether we wanted to keep them or not. They had selected a married couple, and that baby was going, my baby was selected to a specific couple. And the other thing that was pretty awful, and you can see that it was never really about the welfare of the children, was because they never properly screened the adoptive parents. Many of the adoptive parents ended up abusing the children. And if there was any what they considered imperfection or a low AGAR score of the baby, they would call it a deferred adoption, and they would keep the baby under observation until the head doctor or paediatrician said that baby was okay to be adopted. And at Crown Street, they had up to 20% of babies they kept as deferred adoptions. While all the time they're telling people, oh, they must be adopted quickly so they've got a family straight away, and then hunting us out of the hospital after 5 days. Yet they would, if they thought the baby wasn't perfect enough, they would be keeping it in one of their institutions.
And that's where they went. And we had adoptees speak up in the Senate inquiry that they weren't adopted because they had something wrong with them, and that they were sent to an institution where they were experimented on with vaccines and castrated.
Yes.
And all sorts of evils. And yet their mother was willing to take them home.
Yeah.
The world that they were unwanted, and because they weren't perfect enough for their chosen parents that would do their bidding, they then sent this child to an institution where the institution was often paid by the government to allow the experiments on the children. A lot of vaccines that came into Australia, they experimented on the children in the orphanages because there was no parental protection there.
That's right.
Children died and are buried in unmarked graves, and it's horrific. Like,
tragic.
Yeah.
How dare they? I mean, oh my gosh.
But this is the evil that exists, that a lot of people are just totally unaware of, just living their lives, getting married, going to the movies, shopping, barbecues and whatever. And this is the evil that's going on in the background. And it's very much like what we've had for the last couple of years, how all the propaganda about, so-called virus and the cure and whatever they, the people that really were astute dug deeper and found out the reality and have along the way woken a lot of people up. But there's still many people that are very oblivious to the agenda and are just living their life. And it's just, I can't pick up my phone in the feed without seeing the people just falling, suddenly, suddenly died. It's just horrendous. And
dads or SIDS.
Yeah. And this is the type, and, I had someone say to me once, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist because of your adoption. And my first response was yes, because they didn't like what they were hearing from me about what was currently happening. And I said, definitely, I know my government can lie to me. I know that they can do nefarious things and shake hands and grab hands with nefarious people and nefarious agendas and sell it off as something wonderful. I know I'm a victim of it. So, yes, why wouldn't I be awake to other things as well?
And also how coordinated it can be. How coordinated, like with the child welfare, putting some magazines through the 60s about all these unwanted children when they knew they were not unwanted at all. Meanwhile, you've got the health department issuing internal regulations as to how unmarried mothers should be treated, and they're following those dictums while they're putting out to the public that we didn't want these children, that we wanted to get on with our lives, you know. So that's a conspiracy, you know, where you've got the child welfare conspiring with the hospitals, conspiring with the social workers, conspiring with the adoption agents. That is a conspiracy fact, and that's what's happened. And I think that's one, like I said, because the demand for babies is still so great, they can say with the Indigenous situation in Australia, oh, that was part of Australia's white Australian policy. That was part of our colonial past or racist past. But when it comes to the white Australian stolen generation, they don't want to admit that because there's still so many people that want to adopt. And there was articles published in the Australian newspaper, 2 particular articles that came from an independent think tank, and both were attacking the apology, saying, do not let this apology tarnish the institution of adoption.
Yeah.
And that same person had written articles talking about how the IQ, and quoting people who said the IQ of children who are taken from their single mothers and given to married couples goes up 10 points. You know, and the whole thing, because when I did my research, I took it right back because I was trying to find a context of, well, how did this happen in Australia in all these public hospitals? How did it become, you know, sort of across Australia-wide that they're all following this kind of format? Well, I went back and I had to go back to Britain and what was happening in Britain, particularly starting from the time of Malthus in 1790. And that's what eugenics was based on. It was based on Malthus's treatise, which said that basically if we don't control the breeding of the poor, all the resources will be eaten up and the wealthy will starve along with the poor. So a lot of the wealthy elite are neo-Malthusians. In fact, Darwin's theory of evolution was based on Thomas Malthus. He actually says that in his writings.
Sorry, Chris, I actually did, I'll have to find the heading of it, but I actually covered it with Chantelle some interviews ago, and I started out with Sanger, the lady that brought in
Sanger, yes, she was a eugenist,
and how she got caught up in I can't pronounce it again, Malthuism, and where that came from, Darwinism, and then it came into Freudism, which is the eugenics, you know, like everything. It's sort of the minute.
Well, the eugenics actually goes back to Malthus.
Correct.
Because he's talking about we've got to watch the breeding and not let the poor breed too much, because if you were poor, that was because you had a moral failing. It didn't matter that the wealthy was screwing everybody and throwing them off the land and all the rest of it. So Thomas Malthus, and then followed up by Darwin. Then they had the British Eugenics Society, which Darwin's grandson, Leonard Darwin, was running for quite a while. And you had Herbert Spencer, who was also involved with Darwin. And the other one that was a prominent eugenist was Thomas Huxley. And then his 2 grandsons, Aldous Huxley. And they're all involved. They were all involved with the setting up with the UN and the WHO and that kind of thinking, which is all based on that Malthusian, we've got to depopulate, we've got to control the breeding habits, we've got to only have certain people allowed to breed. Yeah, we don't want any useless eaters, do we?
Any useless breeders.
Useless breeders or eaters or whatever.
Yeah, it's a crazy world we live in, and we're most of us have been oblivious. We've been living in it, and the sad thing is that most victims have no concept of the enormity of what they've been a part of, what they've been thrust into, you know, like, and why they've done it to them. And a lot of the mums would just think, oh, you know, I had sex outside marriage, I was a bad girl, and I deserved. That was it. That'd be as far as.
Well, that was the brainwashing too. That was constant brainwashing. This is your fault. This is happening to you because it's your fault. The same as a girl that gets raped. You know, you shouldn't have been out that late at night. You shouldn't have had too many.
You shouldn't have been wearing a short skirt. You should have been wearing a bra.
Exactly. You should have worn a burqa. Well, I say, well, if a rapist is a rapist, even if you're wearing a burqa, they would still rape you. You know, but human beings hate to feel powerless. And so therefore, we'd rather blame ourselves and feel that we have some control. And this is why part of the whole program within the hospitals was to traumatize us by isolating us and not allowing us to know what was going to happen next. That was a big part of this feeling of total powerlessness and traumatizing us, and hence the complex PTSD, because we didn't know what was happening next. And I believe that was strong enough because it was involved with the drugs, the brainwashing, the isolation, the terrorizing. That is what created this kind of altered state where part of our mind split off and stayed at the age of when it happened to us.
Yeah.
So if you were 16, there's a part of you, like when I first met my daughter, because I'd never seen her. I had never been able to look at her or gaze at her face or hold her or anything. So the whole birthing process was interrupted. So when I first met her, I was quite shocked to feel part of me saying, well, where's the baby? They've made a mistake. Where's the baby? So then I realised that part of me, my personality had fragmented, and part of me was still back in 1969 waiting to finish the birth, waiting for someone to bring me my baby.
It's crazy because the trauma, that again just highlights the trauma that the mothers go through. And, you know, if like, how many mothers have not reconciled that, right? Over time. And that trauma just gets passed on, whether it's conscious or unconscious. That trauma is passed on, and these fragments of pain are literally what consume us. And we can never, ever deny that, because that is, I mean, just what you ladies are saying, and this is just 3 of you. I mean, there are 30 million others out there, I have no doubt, that have had similar type experiences. And like that video where these women are told their children are dead and they've died. You know, a woman knows, she knows in her heart, she knows she will feel that child around, whether it's in a dream or whether it's in her subconscious or whether she's intuitive enough to say, you're lying. I know my child is alive, you know, or just the fact that the child was died, or she was told that the child was dead, and it's given some fake ashes to go and release somewhere, you know, there's your baby. It is disgusting. I tell you, these people should be charged with crimes against humanity. Because
why haven't they? And why haven't they? You know, that's the question. That's what came through when we were doing the reading for the family, that she got a $5,000 fine after being all that cruelty to the children that they knew about, and not just 1 or 2, but the 27 or 28 children. that could talk about how cruel it was, talk about the beatings and the dunking their head in water, like waterboarding, and the other things that they were doing, and how she made a hut. What the Guardian, he had $150 million when she passed away, and she owned several properties interestingly in New York State. So she had properties, she had money. Well, where did all that money come from? You know, and why wasn't she charged? And she only got a $5,000 fine. That was it.
She's gone, Lisa.
I just asked a question, Dr. Christine. So my feeling, I've actually met another survivor who was not like you see, like what we just saw the pictures of the children, because not all of them. I don't know why, but she didn't bleach all of their hair. Like, so there were some children who did just have normal, their coloured hair, whatever. So I don't know. But what I wanted to ask you, I believe myself, I don't know if it's just my intuition or that it's the family is still going even though she's dead.
That's what one of the articles said. They said there's still people who are meeting as part of the family.
They still are doing that. I wasn't sure. I just wanted to ask. That was one of my biggest questions I wanted to ask you.
But I don't think there's anything to do with babies. But some of her original, very devoted ones that were really taken in by her and believe she's Jesus Christ, reincarnated. They're apparently still meeting. One of the articles did say that.
Thank
you. She died in 2019. On the 13th of June, and she had what they call it, something dementia, advanced dementia, and she lived a very cushy life in the nursing home in Melbourne for about 12 years. And one of the reporters noted that she was left nursing a plastic doll as her only torment.
Yeah, that's very common. That's very common though, and even in my family, I know that women who you said that they might not consciously remember that they've had a baby or have their baby taken away, end up with dementia, and they're very have this obsession with being a doll as their
I believe that.
Yeah,
it's very common. And I also wanted to say, when I had my son, Dr. Christine, you were talking about the PTSD. He, I don't want to share too much of his little story, but he's our eldest, my husband, and he's struggled with definitely with PTSD. He wouldn't sleep. He was just a very unsettled baby, and during that, when I was pregnant with him, I was 22, so it was still quite fresh. I had severe depression. I was just it wasn't good. But when he was born, I had this, what I believe, I'd break out in rashes, and I would just make sure no nurse was going to take my baby. It had this, what I would call an obsession. No one's allowed to take him, and I actually left the hospital within 1 day instead of staying. Everyone's like, no, stay for 5 days. So now back now and think, that was, at first I thought, that's strange. Why am I doing it? Even while I was doing it, I'm thinking, why am I doing this? And now I know I didn't want anyone to take him. So yeah.
That fear is very hard to resolve. And both my subsequent sons have that fear. They're very have to be there all the time, knowing what's going on, where their kids are, all of that. it's I mean, when they've done experiments on how, how the Bible says goes down, the sin goes down 7 generations. Well, you know what the sin is, a trauma or error. And so when they've done experiments on animals, they have found that epigenetically it goes down around 6 or 7 generations of the animals.
I believe it.
We must actually do a show on eugenics and stuff like that one day. Around this, because I think
that would be good.
Well, the adoption definitely was eugenics based. That, you know, they used to take a complete social work and medical history, not just of the mother, but of the father. And even though they always referred as the putative father, you know, like we were liars, the alleged father, they took not just information about his work and his medical history, but also his siblings, his parents' medical and their work history, everything you could put together to make sure that there was nothing that would be an impairment, or that the baby could have had some kind of problem. Particularly, they were very interested if there was anybody with any kind of psychological problem in the family, or even eyesight, if anybody was wearing glasses. The other thing that they didn't like were red-haired. They'd ask if anybody in the family had red hair. But they did a full eugenic-style social work write-up and medical history to ensure that the baby came from very healthy stock. Because there was an article written by a doctor published in the Australian Medical Journal in 1960, and he said, well, you could make the best of bad genes by giving the baby to a married couple, because neither the unmarried mother or her family are fit to rear a child. And that was published, and there was no pushback in the Australian Medical Journal. And don't worry about breaking the law. This is what the doctor's saying. Don't worry about breaking the law when it comes to adoption. The best thing is for the baby to be taken from the single mother, because they considered it the early part of last century, if you had a baby out of wedlock, you were feeble-minded. Eugenics. When Freud came in and took over social work and started to infiltrate medicine and that, then you were too neurotic and immature, because only a neurotic, immature person would want to keep their child. Someone who had a baby out of wedlock would want to go along and make an adoption plan. When we know that at 16 and 17, your brain hasn't even fully matured, and it's very hard for teenagers to make long-term plans. So here they were saying, you know, but you were immature if you didn't make a long-term plan. But then what they would write on the record, oh, mother is definite about her decision for adoption. So they were always talking out of both sides of their mouths, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I just have to put this comment up here because I don't know who this creature that's leaving comments like this. Johnny's List, whoever you are, I think that if you're being a creep, you better creep out of here very quickly.
He's probably an adoptive father.
What is he saying, Chantelle? I can't see them.
That's woo-woo. I don't know what woo-woo means. So, he's coming back as a character. I don't know. What does it mean?
Woo-woo means like...
Okay, we're not even talking about Sasha Stone here, please. I don't know why it is. It's a troll. It's a troll, really. Please. I'm just going to put him in time out like a naughty child should go. Time out, off you go.
I was wondering what he was saying, woohoo, to what? And I'm like, that's a bit weird.
I can't see any of it, which is probably
I looked at that and I was like, hang on, this is really bugging me, you know. Comes here, woo woo, Johnny's now. Anyone with a name like Johnny's List is a troll, right? That comes in here and then he starts speaking about Sasha Stone, and then he starts talking about
that's what he was doing. Oh, he can go away. He needs
I don't know what we're talking about is
the wrong impression.
I don't know what we're talking about has anything to do with Sasha Stone.
He's come Johnny's come to the wrong place when it's to tackle 4 women over stealing babies. I mean, really? I mean, come on.
There's plenty of other places we can go. Oh, that's funny.
You come to the wrong place. Doesn't play with us.
I'll just add this in before I forget, because I think it's important because of the connection. Like I'm saying, I really, in my opinion, I feel like this is kind of a CIA type, Tavistock type thing. Was that Harry Bailey? He would put in pregnant women into that hospital, the deep sleep hospital, and one of them, my friend Dr. Rickaby, he actually couldn't. This woman came and saw him and said that she had been at that Chelmsford private hospital under Dr. Harry Bailey's care. She was pregnant with twins when she went in there. And when she left, the twins were gone and she didn't know what happened to them. And Dr. Rickaby thought the story was so outlandish, he actually went to Crown Street Women's Hospital and had a look at their microfiche. And in it, he saw that Harry Bailey had indeed ordered a transfer from Chelmsford to Crown Street and did a cesarean on this woman. And that's all it said, right, that he did the cesarean. Then when I'm reading a book later, this is part of my research on, Crown Street and the background for my thesis, I find that, guess what, Dr. Harry Bailey adopted twin girls around the same.
No way. He stole those babies.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying about when I read about the family as a cult, and I think of the whole adoption business as a cult.
Yes. Yep.
The lying, the gaslighting, the child trafficking, putting the cover of a legislation over it and putting us under it and saying, oh, well, you're under the adoption legislation. When in fact, when our children were born, they weren't under any legislation. They were our children. We were the guardians of our children. We hadn't signed anything. There
should not even be a question around that.
That's right.
That's what
and
I'm
so
saying.
And this is how corrupt it was that he could get away with doing that. And when they finally had the Royal Commission into Chelmsford, that Harry Bailey committed suicide.
Oh.
Hmm.
So Chantelle may not know who Chelmsford was. That was a hospital where they did the...
That was the deep sleep therapy, which I was saying. The Harry Bailey was the consulting psychiatrist for pregnant mothers at Crown Street, giving us the same drugs he was giving those at Chelmsford. And he was the doctor who got the Rockefeller scholarship to go to the CIA clinic in Canada, and then went to see Dr. William Sargent, who was connected to Tavistock, running the same deep sleep therapy, mind control stuff in England. In fact, Dr. William Sargent apparently came to Australia in 1960 and gave a lecture at the University of Melbourne on mind control, brainwashing and control of the brain or control of the mind, because he'd written a book on it.
These are the people that I would like to have a moment in private with. Seriously.
And some of those drugs that Dr. William Sargent was experimenting with were the ones Dr. Harry Bailey were using on his patients and on us, like sodium amytal, sodium pentobarbital, those type of drugs.
Yeah. So when it came to the New Haven, when I found out that New Haven Hospital, this is the one linked to Hamilton,
yes.
Q was a private psychiatric hospital owned and managed by Marion Villemek, who was also a family member. Mm-hmm. Many of its staff and attending psychiatrists were also members. The family also recruited some of the hospital patients under the direct psychiatrics, John McKay and Howard Whitaker, also members of the family. One of the original members of the family was given LSD, electroconvulsive therapy, and 2 I pronounce this Leucotomies.
Some type of brain operation.
Lobotomies, yeah. I thought lobotomies, but it's not lobotomies.
Yeah, it's not lobotomy.
During the 1960s. In 1992, an inquiry was ordered into the death of a patient in 1975 that was alleged to have been to deep sleep therapy. The hospital.
That's the therapy. That's the mind control.
So that's New Haven Hospital, and they. So I can just imagine as I was doing this research, and I'm like thinking about, you know, the tactics that they would have used to get these children being connected to a psychiatric hospital and psychiatrists would have been to some of the mothers even, we're going to threaten to lock you up and forever in an asylum basically until you hand over your baby. Or if you go to kids, the minute they would have tried to go to anybody to say my baby's stolen, the power that they would have had to they're nutty, they never had a baby, let's lock them up and then experiment on them or do whatever they wanted to them, to the mothers of these children that they took. I mean, they've made movies of things like this, and they'd, you know, push it as
they're showing us in real and in plain sight what they're doing. I would love to look into the eugenics stuff more, ladies. So, and especially, you know, we're talking about the 7 generations. Because that would be something super interesting as to how that actually pans out and plays out at the end of the day. Really.
I just wanted to say I don't know if it's in the documentary. Have you watched it?
Yeah, a while ago. I don't know. Yep.
And they've also done a series on it. Like it's not, you know, actresses and whatever, blah blah blah. I watched that. It was but anyone who wanted to leave the cult were put into Q.
It wouldn't surprise me. Yes.
So that was very like you would. No, you can't leave. You've got to go. There must be a mental problem. They put them in there, and whether they came out. But I know my great grandmother had mental health issues, but obviously back then they never really spoke about them. She was very well put together. She was single, ironically, so I don't know what was going on there. But because that was very uncommon in her era, and she had 2 children. One is only, you can find it, a birth certificate, and my grandma, my nana, I can't find her birth certificate. I'm on the, you know, the when you do your DNA thing. Anyway, long story short, it's all like what you were saying, Chantelle. It's all through the generations. It's
absolutely.
Someone, no, we're not doing this anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, Johnny, you're back.
Okay. I just want to say too that Chris and I were talking a little while back when I was inviting her to be on the show, and we kind of reminisced a bit about when we first made contact and all the conversations that we would have with each other on the phone, and how many times, Chris, we would hear that tape, that screeching and that tape, and we get cut off so many times. I know. So because when I'd go, Chris, what's that? You know, and of course, you know, I don't think Chris was game to tell me at first. And then I happened to watch something on, you know, having your phone bugged. And I thought, well, that's the sound they reckon they made. And so we're just like going, oh, well, they're getting an earful. And we would get cut off so many times. It was incredible. But I reckon.
I used to always assume someone was listening to me. So I would just, you know, say, well, yes, they were stealing babies. Yes, they were trafficking babies out of hospital. Go for it. You know, you want to learn, okay. I'll take, because, I mean, that's the thing, people get frightened to speak out, but actually there's a power in speaking out,
Totally.
because, like how we're discussing these issues now. I mean, and the books, my thesis where I've got it all laid out. And there, like I've got criminal activities of what was going on in the hospital laid out in print in the thesis, in the mother's book that I did. And also I've been on, podcasts, I've been on TV interviews where I've just said, yes, they stole my baby. They kidnapped my baby at birth. And then they put me under the Adoption Legislation Act and to try and legalise and cover up their crimes. And that's why I like being interviewed live.
Yeah.
Interviewed live. It's there. Often when you don't, they cut it, they just cut all the good bits.
You get interviewed and they just pick bits out, and it was all pre-recorded, and even with myself,
it's waste your time. Yeah. It's better to be live, and then what you're saying is going out, and people are and like I was going to ask Chantelle, what do you think? Do you think that more people are waking up because we're doing podcasts like this? Is that your feeling?
Definitely, yes. If I go back to 3 years ago when Aquarius Rising Africa started, I mean, I've been struck. I don't know how many videos have actually been struck. In fact, my channel got struck because of one of my Australia videos. My entire channel got struck from one of the guys. Yeah, one of the guys that was talking about Derek, that boys' home, where the boys were being taken into this boys' home, the same place that that prolific serial killer, Ivan Milat, I think. Yes, this guy was in the boys' home with Ivan Milat, and he was he was talking about how they actually they MK Ultra'd Ivan Milat to do what he did. And this, so this was all MK Ultra'ing. They turned him into that. And it was actually super interesting. But yes, definitely, it's what I found, to be perfectly honest, in the beginning, there's a lot of sensationalism, this whole Q movement and who's going to this and which of the celebrities are going to wherever it is and blah, blah, blah. And I think I really saw through that crap very early on, right? And I'm not saying it's all bullshit. It's not all bullshit. There's a lot that's very relevant there. But people get very stuck in that. There's a lot of sensationalism in that. And especially interviewing someone like Jessie, who is bringing out this horrific information about the mothers of dark. And I mean, absolutely, because she was trained to be head of the shadow government. Literally, the Queen Mother of Darkness is head of the shadow government, right, in America. So there was a lot of that going on. But I saw, as a healer, I saw through that stuff very quickly. And that's why I said it didn't take me long to figure out, right, like that's when, Kerri, when we first connected, it was like, adoptions, there's something not right there. We've got to talk about that.
Yes.
And,
yes.
Yeah.
Me, adoption is MK Ultra.
Exactly.
It was a massive brainwashing thing. So when COVID started, I freaked because I just felt the same energy, the same vibe that I'd felt in 69. The control, the tyranny, the gaslighting, the lying. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like, so for me, it's taken me a while to get this channel the way I want it. There's lots of survivors that have spoken out, and absolutely each and every one of their stories is very valuable. But I've connected the dots, like Jessie, who's explained, and she's fantastic in terms of giving information on the structure of the system, how it works, the military involved, and then Caleb, who's phenomenal, because Caleb is recently, I think for about 2 months now, Caleb Jade has been on, and he's also a genius kid that was half Native American, half German, forced into the Gateway program, went into the wild hunt when he was 10. No one knew whether it was myth or real, and it's actually real. and then forced into the military and what these guys actually do in the sovereign military or the shadow military. So there's the shadow government and the shadow military that work hand in hand. And then, of course, all of that. So that then would be the first step would be the adoptions or the forced adoptions where the kids are trafficked and all of that. Then the mental health issues that go, that's the next step from that. So when, for example, these kids are SRA'd and they're parents of pedophiles and pretty much like what you ladies are explaining here, that for me was a big thing. So I know Alice Parola does a great job of bringing that because she's one of those kids as well, you know, of that whole mental health stuff. And the fact that we are seeing so many schizophrenics nowadays, we are seeing so many people with bipolar and borderline personality and all these mental labels that are given to people. And no one knows where it comes from. I'm going, it's so obvious, come on. And as a healer, that's what I see. So I'm seeing the adoptions, I'm seeing the mental health, I'm seeing the shadow government, the shadow military, I'm seeing all of that. And I'm seeing, and of course, the whole gay agenda, this transgenderism, that is another big issue I want to be tackling as well, you know, with the gay people and you know, the LGBT is really not what it used to be. Nowadays, now it's got QZX, whatever, and there's this whole fat thing that's come along with that, you know. But it's such a organized system, and that's the one thing I've realized. It is such an organized system, and once we understand how the system works, then we know what we're dealing with. We really are in a simulated reality here. The movie Hunger Games is definitely what we are being subjected to, on a much greater scale. And these are the things that are involved. So when we get our asses out of our head, our heads out of our asses, sorry, or off our phones and constantly looking at the latest Netflix or whatever it is that the majority of the world has bought into, and we start realizing what we're dealing with, like this is the reality of life that we're dealing with. And we can start understanding these things. We can start seeing it, that just because you are not adopted or don't know anyone that's adopted doesn't mean it's not affecting you. It affects us all.
Oh,
and this
absolutely.
Is what I want people to realize this and understand this. So as you know, I just do the stuff every week, every second week. We're just putting out what we need to put out and just putting it out. And you know, that for me, when we have this consistency, is eventually maybe a year or two from now, suddenly people are going to wake up to that as well, to realize we're dealing with. And then people like yourself are out there already, like all of you ladies, you like yourselves are out there. We're talking about these things. They've already been addressed. We've spoken about them. There they are. Go and have a look at that. You know, for me, that's super important. People must be aware. You know,
they have to be aware. And I think because the veil needs to be pierced around things like adoption, because they have gaslit for 100 years the embryonic family is the mother and child. The father is there for the protection of the embryonic family, the mother and child. So when you start tearing that apart, you're tearing the family apart. And that's what they were doing. That's what they started to do at the beginning of last century, and building it up into a system. And at the same time, dehumanizing motherhood, and even commodifying babies. Babies were a commodity. They could be passed on. You don't have to be related to be. You hear it all the time in American films. You don't have to be related to be a family. Anybody can be a family. Even in their cartoons where they have the giraffe with the lion, with the this, with that, and they all become a family. And it's sort of like programming us all the time that blood is not important, that genetics is not important, and it is. We need our tribe. We need our to get people don't even understand identity properly. Adoptees have lots of problem with their identity because they don't see any reflection of themselves in the people around them. There's not the DNA mirroring that goes on. Each family has its own frequency because of the similar DNA. So when a child is taken right away from that linkage, that line, and just attached to another completely different tree, something in them gets broken, gets detached. I mean, there was a Dr. Chilton, famous pediatrician doctor. He said the worst thing you can do for a baby is to take it from its mother at birth and put it in a place, because the mother is home. That's where the baby feels safe, knows the smell, the sound of the voice. They even say that the baby's worked out from listening to the mother, the shape of the mother's face. And some of the cells travel from the baby to the mother and from the mother to the baby. And they're finding out things like, for instance, the cells that come from the baby are actually the first cells that will attack if there's an infection or something in the mother's body. Exactly. I mean, it's just, they think they are gods. You know, these transhumanists think they're gods. They think they can take, they're evil. They're Luciferians. So like you say, they invert everything. But they know so little about creation. We know so little about the body. They think the brain is the mind. You know, they think they don't understand that we're all part of divine consciousness. We're all a spark in this universal consciousness. But we are not God, you know, like what's his name, Yuval Harari from the World Economic Forum. You know, you are now hackable animals. We know what's inside of you. We can put all this nonsense.
It is such a, you know, and one thing, I've been working with kids for a long time. And one thing I understood about kids a long time ago, because suddenly in the last, let's say 20 years now, particularly, there's been a huge upsurge in kids with ADHD and ADD and stuff like that, and putting them on these atrocious medications, Ritalin and all these things, right? So it became very clear to me intuitively that when we're looking at children of today, since the mother has gone to work, since the Rockefellers brought in the 60s, this whole feminist movement, that mothers are now need to be out there working and earning and doing whatever in the way that fathers are. And, you know, you can now be your this counterpart for your man, and you can have this and have that. And make no mistake, I think, don't for one second think, I don't think women have the brains or the ability or capability to do that. I'm certainly one of those women that has had to do it on my own, for sure. And I certainly in many ways have paid the price with my child, because I was a single mother. His father was never even financially involved in any way. So I had to be mom, I had to be dad, I had to be breadwinner, I had to be homemaker. I battled. And it's because of that I realized that the influx of kids that are suddenly getting all these conditions is for one main reason. The mothers are not there to take care of them. The mothers are not there to do their homework, to when they come home from school, to cook them their lunch or whatever it is, because now suddenly everyone is now needing 2 cars and it has to be a double income family and what have you. So for me, that became very, very clear a long time ago that the family unit needs to be together. So that's when I started when I started doing my SunKidz stuff. I realized that, and that's one of the big things I work with parenting, even if you are a single mother, even if you are a single father, because I've also known actually a lot of men in recent years that have taken on their kids, right, with the mother abandoning or whatever the reason might be, right? But they do the best they can to create that home unit like that, you know, but it's not ideal. It is definitely not ideal. So for me, that was the first thing. And then I was thinking, because as I said to you, part of my therapies is doing the womb regression. And I'll take my clients into the womb. And I'm looking and I'm going, hang on. And over years of doing this therapy, it became very, very clear to me, this child, the babies in the womb, are super, super smart. They know exactly what's going on. They know the mother, they're taking on those emotions. They hear the father's voice. They're getting smells. They know what's going on. They know whether they want it or not. They know whether they adopted or not. It became very clear for me. And then one of the final piece of the puzzle was Kerri recently saying that the child is actually the umbilical cord is connected to the mother for almost a year, 10 months. That child is psychically, emotionally, spiritually connected to its mother via them. And it was like, boom, of course it is.
Well, they are.
So
we're one person. Whilst the baby's in the womb, we're one.
Exactly.
And that's when the baby's born, doesn't suddenly think, oh, I'm now a little individual. No, the baby, when he's born, she or he still thinks they're part of mum. Mum is their centre. And not only that, they've now found that the brain of the mother and the brain of is connected too. And the mother's brain is helping to regulate the emotions of the baby. So it's so complex and so and they're thinking, that they can create these babies in pods and things, and they honestly have got no idea. You
Which
can't.
is why there's so many freaking psychopaths out there. They're all psychopaths. Seriously.
But the other thing I think, Chantelle, is very important too is the amount of chemicals in the air, the amount of pesticides in the food, the number of injections on the childhood vaccine, 72
Absolutely.
Between 0 and 18, with mercury and aluminium and fetal and DNA and who knows.
They're shutting down all their chakras. They're shutting down all their energy points. Krida Mutwa, he actually died two days before lockdown started. He was a Zulu man, South Africa's most highly ordained Sangoma, which is a medicine man. And he has for many years been saying and he was actually the one that spoke about Obama he said that man is the Antichrist. Yeah.
Oh, the Antichrist. I thought you were going to say Kenyan.
Well, yeah, we know as a Kenyan. I don't know why he lies to the world. I don't know why no one else knows that. I mean, and he's a Muslim, right? And he's a Muslim.
And he's married to a man.
Yes, exactly. And he actually forms part of the 14th secret Illuminati bloodline, which I think is the line of Ishmael. I think that's what it's called. So yeah, he's a big fat liar. But anyway, Krida Mutwa for many years has been talking about how the vaccinations cut kids off from God, their godly abilities, their psychic abilities, stuff like this. I mean, there was a woman also South African woman, Adi Shab, who I interviewed. Her son in the last year or so passed away. He was 30-something. But when he was a baby, he had a horrific vaccine injury. And she spent more than 30 years taking care of him and trying to get this information out. And everything is just shut down. But but at the end of the day, it is so important that this information, that people get to understand this information, that they get to understand the mother-child relationship. And, I see so much of this, it's my baby daddy, and I get rid of that thing. And, so many men in particular, and women, make no mistake, have no idea of the relationship that they should be forming with that child while it's in the womb. Because it hears the father's voice too. And remember, it's got half daddy's DNA. So it's completely connected to daddy as well. And it hears daddy's voice, and you see how happy they get or scared they get, in the womb. So when we are smartening up as human beings to these things and understanding how important it is, how important pregnancy is, how important it is for a mother to be happy and enjoy when she's pregnant, it makes such a massive difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So these are things, I think, and this is why for me, it begins here. And when children are stolen from their mothers at birth, and it's as we all know, how secret that's been kept from us, right? And how much we've been lied to about that. How traumatic that is, even before the child has begun its life, even before the mother, and how many, up until the 60s, again, there was no such thing as counseling or emotional support or stuff like that. Women were just ingesting this. They were keeping it to themselves, and men as well. We see from also, Kerri, what you were saying earlier on, about how many men have been through these traumas and actually, never dealt with those issues. And when you see them in old age, dementia, all sorts of things start setting in. And it's all a result of this. And we cannot actually, as intelligent a species as what we are, we cannot actually carry on being so idiotic, thinking that these things are not important. They are super
huge.
Really.
Yeah, definitely. So, we got to remember that we've got an enemy that hates God. We're all created in the image of God.
And hates humans as well. Hates us because...
Well, that's where I was going to go. Yeah. And then, the family is the divine pattern. And wants to destroy families. And by destroying families, he breaks it down by attacking the family and removing the child, causing as much trauma as he can. What he wants is... he wants to be worshipped. He wants a whole bunch of followers who will obey him at every beck and call, and that's how it comes about. We're talking about raising children in the incubators again, or creating them. He doesn't want them to think for themselves. God created us to think for ourselves and to have choice. They don't like anything about choice at all. It's about, conniving, deceiving, and whatever he can do to tear us down. And the biggest element of this is that he wants to tear down our relationship with God so that we won't understand our value and who we really are. And, adoptees are 4 times more likely to suicide than non-adopted people.
Absolutely.
And because they feel that they have no value, that their parents threw them away. And, at birth...
Based on lies.
Correct. So they're taken at birth. Many of us ended up in homes where we were abused. So, the damage is just horrendous. And this is the society in which we're all supposed to, you see the news every night of people complaining that, there's drug and alcohol issues and violence. And it's because the society in itself, the core of what God created, has been so attacked and so damaged. You come out of the womb, you walk into the world, and you're not functioning the way that God intended you to. So you're dabbling, and you've come out with mental health issues and suicide, depression and dysfunction, and it just keeps going on and on and on.
And that's right.
And then you add all the chemicals and the chemtrails and the injections and all that.
Exactly.
And then they want to inject now all the cattle, the beef, and all of that with mRNAs. And I mean, it's just insane. And to me, it's like if people don't wake up, it's going to be too late. We will. There needs to be an awakening, I think, and people need to stand up and take action. And because Australia is, from what I could, I mean, we were aware, Kerri and I were aware, and have been aware because of our experience, how corrupt a government can be and how they can lie to their citizens, and how they are not for the best interests of what the citizens are. You get people, they're working for the elite. And I think in Australia, in my opinion, they're working for the royal family, the British monarchy. We're sort of still under the control of that system. And so unless we start to take back sovereignty for ourselves and for our country, things are going to get worse, a lot worse, exactly. I think. Exactly. Yeah. So we keep speaking.
Carry on, sorry, Christine.
I was just going to say that's why it's important we keep speaking and talking.
Exactly, yeah. That's exactly to keep talking about these topics, because this right here you know, understanding the importance of a woman's role. You know, she's not just, I mean, and like, what's this whole new gender crap talking about a chest feeder or a what? I mean, please, you know, I see that and I want to throw up on their shoes. Please, I'm just like, get out of my sight right now. I don't even have time to debate with you. You know, I mean, a woman and her role as a mother is so sacred. And the fact that mothers that are staying at home have been so now looked down upon. Oh, you lucky, or it's a privilege. And, you know, jealous women who can't afford to stay at home are now pissed off with women who can stay at home and look after their kids. That should be what happens. That should be the order of the day. Men are hunter-gatherers. They provide protectors. It's in their DNA. Women are nurturers, caregivers, creators. They should be at home taking care of their children. And I'm not saying that a woman shouldn't be doing other stuff. Have a home business or whatever, you know, but make sure, you know, that your children are your priority. That, for me, is what I have noticed. Your children need to be your priority.
Absolutely.
They really, really do.
In those first few years.
Yeah, exactly. And as long as we don't get that, we're screwed. And that, for me, is what these shows are about. It's to actually...
And that's what I think they started with us, with mothers, because we were the most vulnerable, a woman on her own and a pregnant woman, most vulnerable to be preyed upon and to start destroying the family. That's how it started. And incrementally, you know, the old saying, you boil a frog slowly. So incrementally, they've been pulling it apart, pulling it apart, pulling it, till now you've got men who can give birth, and chest feeders and parent 1 and parent 2, you know. I mean, they started doing that to us, you know. We were classed as just birth mothers. We were only there. I mean, to me, that's like a breeder. You're the breeder. You're only there to give birth and that's it. So we fought really hard to take that out of their lexicon because they use language. They know how powerful language is, spelling, as you know, with language. And so instead of saying, you know, genital mutilation by cutting the breasts off a child because they think, you know, they've got body dysmorphia when they're 12 or 13, but then calling it gender affirming, the parallels, the gaslighting, use of the language to put the spell on people with their words.
But if we're looking at the whole Luciferian system, that's their agenda. Because if you look at their main icon or whatever it is, it's Baphomet, who's half man, half male, half female. And it really is. And even though we have the, you know, and this is the thing, this is how they invert it, because every woman and every man, we have the yin and yang within us, the masculine, feminine. The right side asserts, the left side receives. So we have masculine abilities. And I'm not talking about rah-rah going out there, but, you know, really the masculine energy is that which asserts. It gives, right? And the feminine energy receives. So we have to be able to have that balance within us that gives and receives. It's got nothing to do with a male or a female. And that's why I say in my situation, you know, with my child, definitely, you know, he's super smart and he was a stubborn kid. And because his father was not involved in his life, you know, when I had to reprimand him, I immediately went into my masculine energy. Immediately. So he got confused between who's mom and who's not mom, you know? So at the end of the day, I was kind of being dad more times than what I was being mom. And that's what he resented in me. And we had big issues around that. And it's only in hindsight I can see that, you know? At the time, I didn't see that. But it's also, you know, again, this whole thing, I'm a single mother, I can do it on my own, screw you, Jack. And actually, I mean, it's not that I chose that consciously anyway. I didn't. I had no choice. I had to make do with but if I could turn the clock back, I would do things very, very differently. For sure. I would do it very, very, very differently. For at least for the time that I had him and he was at school, for sure. I would have done things very differently. I could have done things differently. I just
we all have done things differently, Chantelle.
Yes.
If we had the information we have now, most definitely
Yes.
would have done things differently. But, you know, and we can't kick ourselves for that because we didn't have that information. You know, and I think the important thing is that we do now, and that we're not only just speaking. Like, there are things that I talk about here that I share only because I've dealt with them myself, that I've challenged myself to deal with it. I'm not here telling people something that I haven't already stepped into myself. That would be totally hypocritical, you know. And so, you know, the journeys that I've had, you know, in facing my demons and facing my failings or facing, you know, whatever I've been through, you know, if I can learn from it and then impart it to somebody else, I'm saving them a whole lot of headache, you know, you know, and that's what's important. I think in our culture, this is what's missing, you know. Like, I never had women to sit down and talk to, especially women older than me, like growing up with my children. And my adoptive mother, I told the story about it the other week. Like, I wasn't getting any help there. Like, so, you know, us four just sitting around like this and sharing things about ourselves, they're the things that are missing from our families and the small villages that we would have lived in, where we all supported one another. And that's what's sadly missing in society. You know, when a man does find herself single, you know, the whole village will gather around and there'd be people in the village or the families that become the fathers. You know, when my marriage went kaput, I had nobody. I still got nobody, the manly figure to step up and to step into that space where my boys in particular and my daughter needed that, because the daughter needs the father to print upon her, like, of the great value that she has, and to be treated special, so that she sees herself as such a high value that she won't dip below the bar when she's choosing a husband.
That's right.
So
Exactly.
the fathers are so important to the girls as they are as important to the boys.
That's right.
We marry our fathers. That's the thing. I always say to my male clients, your daughter's got to be sitting on your lap until she's 16, because if she's not, she's going to be finding another lap to sit on, and it's going to be looking for all the wrong attention. So I say that to all the men with daughters.
Yes.
Look after your girls.
Yeah.
It's absolutely so true. And I'm very lucky that I had that, I have to say. Yeah.
What were you going to say, Lisa?
I have 3 girls, and my eldest is 23. She's probably going to watch this, so she'll probably smack me. But so their dad, obviously, he's not perfect, but he's the female of us too. He's got a lot of that energy, and he just my 19. How old is she? She's 18. She'll go and snuggle up to him like she was when she was, you know, 3, and she doesn't care if anyone's and my 23. She's just found a boyfriend. I don't know, whatever they call them these days, but partner, boyfriend. Her first one, and I believe that's totally because I thought, have I done something wrong? Like, she says no. And she's like, I don't want a boyfriend. I'm fine. I'm good. And it's just so beautiful to watch that father-daughter relationship, because I've never had that. So what you're saying is, I've been so lucky, blessed to watch that unfold, and it's how it should be.
It is lovely.
I did say, you were talking about, you know, the mother going off to work and all that. I was lucky that I'm a hairdresser, so I could do stuff from home. But they brought in, you remember, like Kerri and Dr. Christine, like, you could put your baby into care, into childcare at 6 weeks old. That's
Yeah, mothers are going back to work when the baby's at 6 weeks. It's like horrific. And I mean,
I'd be like, I don't want anyone having my baby.
No, exactly.
I'd rather be poor. I'll stay home and be poor. I don't care.
Yeah, stay in a smaller place. You know, you don't need 2 cars.
No, you don't care.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
They don't. No.
And then when you research it, as you were talking about, Chantelle, you find that the whole thing was orchestrated because they wanted to, the bankers wanted to be able to get the tax from 2 people, not 1. and also as part of the depopulation, break up the family,
exactly.
bring in a
Because
more
we've also-
communist
Yes.
type situation.
And now they get to educate our kids. Exactly, because now we're sending our kids to preschool and schools earlier, and they get to educate and and brainwash our kids.
Brainwash,
Break-
yes.
break that bond, that bond
Yes.
that you
Exactly.
Yeah.
and for us, we would often take them out of school every couple of years and homeschool them, whatever. We didn't really do anything. It was just, I just want to be with my kids before, you know, that it just, I didn't understand why, but it was just this thing in me going, no, they need to out, have a bit of
exactly.
Well, there's a lot more people doing homeschooling now. There's a lot more people, particularly with the way that they're intruding in the education with all the gender stuff. People are very concerned about that.
I just
that's
noticed,
been a good thing, I think, in many ways as well.
I just noticed a couple of comments, and Karen Bishop has mentioned about raising a child with disabilities or special needs, and you know, I haven't shared yet on Chantelle's channel, and I want to share later on, and we wanted to do something on miracles with Caleb. Maybe we do something together again, because I haven't even shared this bit, and I don't want to give it all away to Chantelle, but I actually have a son with cerebral palsy, and I noticed that Karen said something about cerebral palsy. He had a stroke in utero. My son had a stroke 12 hours after birth, and he's now 38, and I'm going to share later on something that really special with this child in particular, and what happened in his life. You know, you think it's so devastating having a child with disabilities, and it does bring a whole different package with it when you're raising a child that it faces life. You know, life is hard enough as it is, and you're born with disabilities, but I just want people to know that. So, you know, I really identify when people talk about their children with disabilities. You know, he has cerebral palsy, Asperger's, and epilepsy, life-threatening epilepsy. If he misses, you know, any medication, he has severe seizures, and he lives at home with me, and I take care of him. And, you know, on top of everything else I deal with, I have a lovely son who, he's adorable. So he's my second child. And my oldest child, my daughter, who's 41, she's quite extremely gifted. She was born, my goodness, I think read an encyclopedia coming out of the womb. So, you know, to the spectrums. But I'll manage to tell my story about my son later on down the track. But
love to hear that. Yay! Well, sure. We've been on for now 2.5 hours. We'll do this again sometime, ladies. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was really, really good. And Kerri, we will do another show with Caleb again on that. I know we did speak about that. Love to have you back again, Christine, and Lisa as well. I hope that everything goes well with your situation.
Well, let me know when you want to talk about eugenics.
I was going to say, let's do that, because that is something I'd actually love to discuss. We can go more into that. Yeah,
I'll have to go back and reread a bit of my thesis again and refresh my mind, because
that'd be fantastic.
Because I did a deep dive into that, the whole movement, because I knew from what I had read about it that it was so much of what happened to us was so eugenics based, you know, with the better breeding and that we were classed as inferior and feeble-minded and neurotic and all of this. And that's the basis of eugenics, you know, watching people in different categories and depending on, you know, what happens to them in life. If they're poor or if they're unmarried, then you're in a particular category.
Well, we're going to change that. We'll certainly change that.
Yes.
Look forward to that. Yay. Okay, ladies, God bless you all. Thank you so much for everyone for watching. Is there was anyone like to say anything just in closing?
Oh, just in closing, Lisa, when I first saw you, I couldn't believe how you had the age of your children and how beautiful and young you look. I thought you were, like early 20s. So I was great to find out that you're older. Yes, and very mature. Yeah, you look gorgeous. And thank you, Chris. I've really loved the friendship that we've had over the years, and you can see why, Chantelle. Anybody that taped our phone calls certainly got an education.
Their ears would have been burning, Kerri.
Well, let's burn those ears up even more.
Okay, good everybody.
Thanks, Chantelle, for allowing me to be a part of this. It's really great. Thank you, and thank you to everybody with their comments. So appreciated, and I've noted a few things to stack away to talk about later.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys.
Good night, everybody. Good night.
Cheers, guys. Take it easy.
Bye.